At a very young age, I've always had a tendency. I remember playing with my mother's shoes, going to my mother's boxes where we should keep all her old shoes, and I would just play with those and walk around the house like a proper girl, like I would
Yeah,
say, like a little girl. And my mother's Nigerian, and Nigerian culturally, we have this, the heritage is about also really looking good and dressed well. The fact that I had my commitment, which was like religiously going to dancing, to my hip hop dancing, and then I would go to work basically, with this woman. My mom was really happy because, I wasn't in the street and wasting time. I was actually doing something with my life, so I always had this sort of trajectory. I left Italy also for that reason. I wanted to be around like-minded people, and that's the reason why I moved back to London.
Hello and welcome to How to Have Extraordinary Relationships podcast. Today I am very delighted to have pinned down the busy metropolitan mover and shaker that is Barbara Ayozie Fu Safira. She is a creative fashion stylist, an art director. She provides services for fashion, catwalk, online content, private clubs. You can see her work all over the place. Bumble TV, she does music videos, she's done stuff for the BBC, for Channel 4. And I met Barbara at a party because she walked in and I looked and I thought, who is that woman? And I tracked her down. And now she's here to tell us all about her life. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Barbara.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So when I met you, people kept taking pictures of you because you were dressed and beautifully in this long leather coat and you had your head on up. I mean, how is it walking through the world with this? Is this the reaction you get? People constantly trying to photograph you? How does that feel?
Uh, it's actually, it's very funny or very interesting, because I would say I am not famous as Rihanna, or I don't know, like Julia Roberts, but in this case, Rihanna, because she's also a woman of color.
Yes.
And, and yeah, and I get photographed all the time when I'm walking in the street, and, when I'm just like, going for a run. Uh, so it's very interesting. It's actually
Yeah.
very interesting. Sometimes it's also a bit like annoying, because, like, um, I'm being private, like maybe I'm
Mm.
having a walk with a friend, and, like, and people just captures you and without really asking, and you're like, oh, well, I'm not a puppet. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's an interesting, I say, feeling, but obviously I'm grateful because whatever that might be, I guess, I should take it as a compliment as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching it and I thought this is a little intrusive, because you're not, it's like you become a public figure, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. But that's the thing. It's like that's the thing which I thought it was peculiar, because I've been working in the industry, in the creative industry, for quite some time now, 6, 7 years, behind the scene.
Mm.
Um, I'm grateful for all the job that I work on, the project, they came out beautifully. But I never, like, yeah, I've never really reached the newspaper, the front of the newspaper, as a celebrity, such as I'm a performance celebrity, I'm an actress, and, all of this, I always get on the front of the newspaper for my style,
Yeah.
and then, but this is just me being, this is my everyday, so obviously when I'm at event, I'm on the front page. When I'm in my normal everyday life, like, people like very intrusive, like, yeah, just capture, capture, capture. But yeah, it's just interesting, because I've never really worked to become famous as maybe the celebrity that we all know, that I've just mentioned, such as Rihanna, that of course she
Mm.
gets paparazzi everywhere she goes. I get paparazzi everywhere I go in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, when I saw you, I think you had your hair in three different bunches,
yeah,
big glasses, a
yeah.
long, I think it was a long leather coat or faux leather or whatever, long, long, long coat. You looked amazing. I mean, it's quite something. So tell me about your style. Do you have a way of describing your style for everyone that's listening?
Well, my style, if I could describe my style is the evolution of my musical taste, I would say.
Mm,
It's the evolution of me as a human being, and it's the result of an equation of my life, of the experiences of my life, realistically. And then, of course, my surrounding, my understanding, my observations. Yeah, it's very human, like I've never followed a trend. Of course, maybe when I was teenager, like I would read magazine and,
mm,
look at celebrities and of public figures and, or style that interested me. But in a older age, I would say, it's just simply been me, really, what made me feel comfortable and confident to face the world.
yes. Because so you've, I mean, I know that you've moved around, like you've lived in many different countries, haven't you? So
Yeah,
where's your heritage from? I think you told me it was Nigerian. Am I correct in saying?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Have you
Um,
have you lived in Nigeria or is it?
Never, never. No. So I was born and raised in the northern Italy, in a little town, well, not that little, quite famous because Shakespeare mentioned it in Romeo and Juliet, Mantova.
Ah.
So I was born there and I grew up there, been raised there. And then I went to school by the Lake Garda.
Mm,
Yeah, and then eventually I've moved to London, and then I moved to Paris, and then I moved to Berlin, and then I moved back to London and decided to make London my home. Yeah, so my heritage is a bit like obviously my DNA heritage is Nigerian,
mm.
but my everyday being it's pretty much I would say multicultural European Italian, big imprint of Italian. Yeah,
And how have you found living in the different places? You're based in London now, but
yeah.
when you say you feel, the Italian, how does that work with your style and the work that you do, all these different influences and
Well, like I think it works very well because London has always been a very multicultural city. And London is one of these sort of cities where you meet people that are actually from other places, right? Of course, you meet generation that were, like Italian generation that were born and raised here, but then also you meet Italian that just moved from Italy to London.
Mm, mm,
So I think having all of this pocket of different culture had really helped me to integrate and understand very well the dynamic of such a city, because
mm, mm,
I guess it taught me how to be an observer and more than a protagonist, realistically. And then by being an observer, it gave me the skill to be able, to navigate in rooms and if want so to be the protagonist of the room. Yeah.
yeah. So I always think his Italian style as being very flamboyant and Roberto Cavalli and sort of animal print and Versace. And is that the case, do you think? Or
Well, I guess there is a stereotype on ideology of what is an Italian style.
yeah.
I certainly say we are open to life, in terms of our style. But I would also say, arguably say, this ideology it's more based on the Italian of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. So when the thought those big name
Mm,
flourish and we have the big Italian cinema and all of this. So I don't necessarily it's truly based on today's information, but it's more of the history of the culture of Italy.
mm.
And so, yeah, we're certainly flamboyant, but also very elegant and very conservative in different ways. And yeah,
So when someone comes, and how do people, I mean, what do people come and ask you to do in terms of working? When people come, I'm sure projects are different, but how do you work with people? Because you've got so much you're bringing in, isn't it? How do you work out what
So
style you use? Yeah.
it really depends on what they come to me for.
Hmm.
If they come to me for a TV advert, as in commercial, you have HOD, and then, some of them come to me for to be a costume designer or a stylist, and other people come to me and ask my expertise as a production designer or an art director. So
Mm.
that's the different hats. Same person, just different hat, different sort of skills. And if a client just comes to me as like, I need some suggestion in terms of style and consult in terms of that, then that's a different sort of arts. And then other people come to me as ask me as just bring a more overall generic visual identity as a creative director. So it really depends on what they need. I guess the common thread here, it's my approach to it. It's just the signature style that I have.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell us about the signature style. Yeah.
I guess my signature style is bold, elegant, timeless, thoughtful, and thought through.
Yes. Elegant, thought
Bold,
through,
yeah,
bold.
yeah.
Yeah. So people will come to, if people have got get to know your work. Do you think that's what happened to people? Is it word of mouth? Do people say,
Yeah.
"Oh, yeah."
I think it's I would say 60/40, 60 word of mouth and 40, Instagram and all of the shebang like that. And yeah.
And how did you start out then? What were you like as a little Barbara? Were you interested in clothes and fashion, or were you just sort of, was that not your thing?
Well, when I was at a very young age, I've always had a tendency. I remember playing with my mother's shoes, going to my mother's boxes where we should keep all her old shoes, and I would just play with those and walk around the house like a proper girl, like I would
Yeah,
say, like a little girl. And my mother's obviously my mother's Nigerian, and Nigerian culturally, we have this, the heritage is about also really looking good and dress well. There is a proud in that, which is very similar to the Italians. So my mom would always make sure that all of us, four, my siblings and I, would always look on point, and she'll always buy me this amazing little outfit, and I would really enjoy, especially the one that I really loved. I would really enjoy them, and I have very vivid memories of those outfits. And and then when I was teenager, I began my journey in hip hop. Like, I started dancing. I did classical dancing, modern dancing, then hip hop. So from the age to 6 to the age of 16. And then I really think my style really started to define when I started dancing and hip hop, because hip hop is a culture, and within the culture, culture represent, the way you dress, the way you express. And then I felt really connected and related to that. And so I would go to my hip hop classes lessons, and I would have a sort of outfit. And so that, I think, was the beginning, the inception of me really creating my style. And that's why I said it's the evolution of a musical taste.
yeah.
And then I met this lady at the age of 13, I believe. Yeah. She opened the first shop in my town, which to me had the best window. And I remember each day before getting to my class, I would stop and looking, like watching these windows, and I would be like amazed and mesmerized. I was like, wow, this is so good. This is so different, especially coming from the north of Italy, where very conservative and, very classy, elegant, but certainly I wouldn't say avant-garde. And
Mm.
I would say maybe that was the first time I experienced avant-garde, the definition of avant-garde, and or the pret-a-porter.
Ah,
And so I would go every single day. So, after a couple of weeks, I started to walk in the shop. So not just being outside, like admiring the windows. I would walk in the shop and just, looking at the clothes, looking at the shoes. I kept on doing that for months and months. And then one day she was like, "Would you like to work for me?" And I was like, "Yes," And that's when I began, I guess, my career, my understanding in the fashion world. And she would take me with her to Bologna to the wholesaler to restock the shop. And I
ah,
didn't know what I was doing. I was just following this woman, and she was a model and at the time and a stylist. So when she would take me to this trip, we would like choose the collection for the shop to restock the shop, but also we would choose collection pieces for her shoots, which she would take me with to a sister in Milan. And so all of this was happening without me knowing what I was doing. I was just following this woman and just be amazed by like 6 a.m., like wake up call, even earlier. She would come and pick me up at 6 a.m. So I would have to wake up
wow.
like 5:30. And, so yeah, and I remember the first time she'd asked me to select few items for a shoot. She was like, "You go now and you pick." And I remember picking this amazing, like quirky, like skirts and hat. And I remember her face, her expression. She was like, she was shocked. She was like, "Oh, okay." And then I was like, "Okay, I think I'm into something. I'm understanding, because I was a sponge, obviously."
Yeah.
And uh, and then so then that carry on until I was 16, and working with her, dancing hip hop. And that was, so then that these two things, so music, culture, and fashion, were intertwined between my everyday living. And I would definitely be always the most well dressed in my own town, the more avant-garde. And I was already like going out, hanging around with her friends, which were way older. She was 50s, 50 or
Wow.
late 40s at the time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and she had this amazing queer community. And so it was my first time to be fully introduced into the queer community. And then eventually I met my first boyfriend, which we had like, I think, 15 years differences at the time. And he was a music director. He would travel the world, and he would come back from his, journey with garment from New York, from San Francisco. And he would always come with these amazing pieces, which actually, like the testament of time, I still use. Some of them I still own
Mm.
after 15 years, 16 years. So yes, I think that was the imprint of my today.
Well, that sounds amazing. So, you're dancing hip hop. So the hip hop uniform would be what? Hoodie, tracky bottoms.
No, not necessarily. We would wear like baggy jeans with tracky buttons and like baseball vest, and or just like like cotton vest, and being chunky necklaces and beautiful sneakers on point, trusting socks and scarf and foulard, and a bit of all of this. And always remember that I was introduced to hip hop culture in Italy. So what I could reach in terms of garment were the the Italian interpretation of hip hop, of my interpretation
Mm,
of hip hop through
mm.
Italian, garments. So it was always very elegant because Italian itself, they are elegant. So yeah,
And so the music and the style went together, yeah. That's
yeah,
that a lot of this your style is not influenced by, but it matches with music, as it were.
yeah,
And then you met this woman and you worked at the shop. Sounds amazing.
yeah. It was beautiful.
And then you got an introduction to a completely different set of community, the queer community, and
Yeah,
part of it.
yeah.
And what did your parents think of all this? Were they like, "What the hell's happened to Barbara?" Or were they,
No, actually, my mother especially, because my parents are separated and divorced. My mom actually was really really happy about it because, like when you are that young, you can get lost,
Mm.
with the wrong people and, all of that. And, my parents always gave me very fundamental, important values. They're very religious people and always about family, hard workers. And, my dad was one of the first, I would say, richest, like, black man, legal immigrant, in the northern Italy, unheard of, and
Really?
so, yeah, so, and when my parents divorced, and, it was four of us, and, my mom had to work and my father was working, so they were not necessarily very present physically. The fact that I had my commitment, which was like religiously going to dancing, to my hip hop dancing, and then I would go to work basically, with this woman. My mom was really happy because, I wasn't in the street and wasting time. I was actually doing something with my life, So I always had this sort of trajectory, and then,
Mm.
and she loved it. And yeah, she wasn't worried at all, actually. I think she was pretty content that I've managed, nonostante, like, nonostante in English means like, even though she was absent because she had to work to support, the family, like, I didn't cause any trouble. I was actually making something,
Yeah.
already at a very age. Yeah.
So were you brought up in the church? It was
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Catholic church. And my parents are Jewish by definition.
Uh-huh.
But because I was born and raised in the north in Italy, and Italian are Catholic, and then so brought up in a Catholic church, and I had godparents, which, when my parents would be at work, I would spend some time with two of my godparents. One had a big farm, so they would come and pick me up after school. We'd go to the farm and, spend my beautiful days, within horses and pigs and cows and dogs and
Mm.
chicken. Or I would go on the other side, which were more like a business owner of factories, and so yeah. Or I would go to catechismo. I don't know how you say catechismo in English, but it's like,
Catechism, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Confession?
yes. Basically, it's like this after school where you go, to learn about the Bibles, and
Oh
then
yeah.
eventually do your communion, and
The Bible
like,
study class.
yeah, Bible study and things like that. So I would do that. Um, So yeah, yeah, that's me.
Did that influence you, or does that come into influence some of your work that, there are elements of Catholicism and iconography and the
Absolutely. Especially I would certainly say in the latest years that I also started painting and doing photography. My latest body of work, which I'm hoping to exhibit by the end of this year, is based on that. It's based on my religious upbringing, but in my everyday discipline, I would certainly say so. Yeah, because I'm very, I don't know if the right word is conservative, but it's in the way I dress, in the mannerism that I have. I'm very, it's certainly very linked to this, to this teaching of being humble and, being respectful towards yourself and the others. And, that although I work in an industry where it's all about self and self and self, and, I'm more narcissist in a way, like I always have this very good balance and distance, and a very big, very covered in a way. But and
Mm,
if I'm sure, there is always a sense of like dignity and, royalty
mm.
with it, and yeah, regal, very regal. I would say that's the right word, And to me, this regalness comes from the teaching of, certainly, of the Bible in this case, and yeah.
Yeah, so it must be a difficult industry to be in. You've just sort of, yeah, mentioned a little bit about because it feels like it's all about what show or networking, or I mean, how did you break into that industry, this industry of art direction and stuff?
Well, it all started at the end of my last year of my studies at University of East London, for my final major project. So I started I studied fashion marketing, creative fashion marketing. It was the first year the University of East London would had that course, and then I got an unconditional offer. I took
Mm,
it obviously, and
mm.
at the end of my my studies from a final major project, I had to create a piece of work, a business proposal for what was going to be my career, and at the time I wanted to be a stylist. So I was like, so what's the best way for me to showcase my style on 360 degree?
Mm.
And I created a piece of film, and this film, my tutor really loved it, and they decided to submit it to Aesthetica Magazine Short Film Festival, which is a very renowned, big festival for film, for short film and adverts. And then I got into the final, and then which was like unheard of.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I was the final. I was competing with Adidas and Garrett Puke, like Etro, like massive brands, and it was my fashion film. And
Wow.
through that, then I've met producers, directors, and all the Shaban, and that was really the what opened me the doors to this industry. Yeah.
So how do you keep yourself focused? Because there must be a lot of people telling you a lot of stuff. I mean, you were shortlisted. I imagine lots of people like you're amazing. How do you keep yourself kind of, I guess, grounded?
To be honest with you, like I think I have a good circle of friends, which are they're not necessarily part of the industry, that we grew up together, and I would say that's one thing. But the fact that the values that I have that be taught to me, those are what really they keep me grounded. I go to church every week, every Sunday. Unless obviously I'm working or I'm unable to attend my service, I'm always in church. And then I think also it's just natural, just the way I am, really and truly, like I, because of the nature of me being the first generation of Italian-Nigerian, I had to navigate, like for the first time, so many things, and then I guess I learned throughout my life that you have to be patient. You have to be an observant, and things can come and go. Like as in um, yes, yes, and I certainly think because of my mother's and God, I see things in a different way. I'm very human.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
What sorts of things did you need to negotiate? So you're saying first generation Italian Nigerian.
Well, obviously, racism. You
Mm,
know, uh, this multicultural, being the two cultures, and where do you fit, where do you belong, because obviously in Nigeria, I am Nigerian as being black, but my accent is not Nigerian, my behavior is not Nigerian. And in Italy, I was fully Italian. And so people that knew me, my friend, they're like, I was like them. I was Italian to them, but I would always encounter a situation where people would like speak to me, and be like, "Oh my God, your Italian is amazing. It's fantastic. How did you learn?" And I was like, "Oh," and I'll be like, "Oh, I was born here." You know, like in retrospective, I understand because I was the first, until the age of 19, in high school, in my high school of like maybe 3,000 students, we were people of color.
wow.
Like, yeah, so
Huge.
like the first 20 years of my life, there was never anyone looking like me. It's like, so I had to navigate that because
Mm,
I was Italian, my upbringing is Italian, but
mm,
my color, my pigmentation, it's not Italian,
mm, mm.
so I always had to, navigate that, and then when I moved to London, it was the opposite. You know, it was the opposite. It's like, oh, where's your accent from? I was like, oh, my accent is Italian. Oh my God, so you're Italian. And for the first time, people considered me Italian, full Italian,
Oh,
you
interesting.
know? And I was like, oh dear, I'm suddenly Italian now, you know? And then, so you have to come to understanding that you are both, you know? And yeah. And certainly also like within the Black community, you know, I am one of a kind because again, I'm the first generation. I was born in Italy. I was brought up in a very affluent place, you know, and then, you know, perhaps I had almost like quite a posh upbringing. And, you know, and when you like, yeah, when I met people in London of color, you know, they didn't necessarily could place me. They could relate to me because of my color, but they could not relate to me because of my experiences, you know.
Mm,
And in Italy, we don't really necessarily have social class systems, you know. We do obviously have the aristocracy and the middle class, but you know, where here you do. So the fact that I grew up in the countryside and you know, like my godparent had a farm and you know, my other godparent had a massive factories and you know, I grew up by the lake and you know, some people would associate me as being posh, you know, well for me this is just how I grew up, you know, and obviously, you know, the fact that I've been studying since the age of 6 and, you know, and then, I've lived around the world and, you know, especially in a very European centric way, you know, a lot of people, yeah, of color that did not had maybe the chances to be you know, placed in circumstances, in circles of different sort of upbringing, and they would have difficulty to understand me. They wouldn't say, "Well, you're not really like us." You know, you are. We have the same color, but you're not like us. And at the beginning, it was hurtful because I was like, finally, when I moved to London, I was like, finally, I have my black community, you know, it's like we can relate in so many different ways. But then I firstly had to learn that actually, no, really, like I'm more close to my white peers because at the end of the day, that has been my upbringing. You know, my color doesn't necessarily define who I am. It's just my color, you know. Yeah.
it's a lot to wrestle with, isn't it? I mean, being only two people at school who are of color must have been difficult.
Well, it's all I knew.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't think it was difficult. It's just it is what is it, you know, it is what it is, you know, um, and I was pretty, thanks God, you know, I was, you know, really slim and well
Mm,
spoken and intelligent, smart and good looking and good dressed and da 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 da. Da. And so that really helped, you know.
mm.
If I would have been like way darker skin, you know, like you know, bigger and all this shit, but it would have been a totally different, it would have been a disaster, different story. But yeah, no, like I'm glad.
And how was it in Paris?
Oh, Paris was fab.
Oh,
Yeah. Paris was fab. Paris very very similar to Italy, to be honest with you, and very similar. I'm from the north of Italy, so I would
mm,
say very similar to the north of Italy, because Paris is very bourgeois. Uh, and I was living with my dear friend Camille, like a beautiful. She was my muse at the time, bourgeois Parisian lady. Um, it was really lovely. It was very similar. I don't know, like I think, yeah, it was very much of the dream of Paris. What's your ideology, think, idea of dreaming, living in Paris? That was my life for like those 6 months. I was working with Chanel, and then I was living in this amazing flat with my friend. She would play the opera in the morning, bring me like orange juices, and then grand. You know, we would
the
read,
dream, huh?
yeah, we would read Bukowski and write poetry, and then you know, and walk and go to like a museum, and then it was very much beautiful. like rustling into like vintage shop and like looking. Oh, it was fabulous. I guess the only thing that didn't work for me is that they still had a very much an Italian mentality.
Mm,
Well, like a little bit more close-minded mentality. And then I left Italy also for that reason. I wanted to be around like-minded people, and that's the reason why I moved back to London, because here you're very much yourself.
mm, mm. So when you're working, are you getting lots of ideas from like vintage shops and designers? Are you mixing it all up, or how do you?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
always mix everything, but it always depends. It always depends on what is the project and what is the brief. But as I said, I've been studying history of art since the age of 6.
Mm,
Like I'm older than that now, so I have a lot of knowledge in that regards. I have a lot of knowledge. I'm a very curious person, and then again, like I have friends from all sorts of walk of life, and I, yeah, I mean, I'm curious. I'm interested. Like I love going to markets, whatever it is an African market, whatever it is a vintage market, whatever it is like a Swedish market. I just love to go to markets because I think it's where you can grasp a bit of the culture, the essence. Um, I'm a big humanist and observant to be, yeah. So yeah,
and you must get asked to lots of things, parties, openings.
yeah.
Do you go to all of them, or are you a bit like, how do you enjoy the social part of it?
I do, yeah. I love having a bit of socialite life as well. I think it's fun. You always meet interesting people. I do enjoy. I attended to a dinner at the Ned hosted by Givenchy this week. I
Oh,
attended to a dinner party re-election with the UN and Liberia for the IMO this week. I attended last night to a dinner at the Kensington Palace with Nest, the New York branch. Um, what else? I've been having like events almost every evening. Well, today is Friday, so yeah. So
right.
Monday was with the UN. Tuesday was with Carlotto Tiger, the launch of the new collection, a Japanese trainers brand. Uh, Wednesday was with Givenchy and then and the Net. Thursday was at the Kensington Palace with Nest and Purple. And yeah, so this is just this week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Busy, busy. And where do you want to be heading then? Do you want to go into your art more? How do you want, you're curating your life, aren't you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think like that's a very good question. Like I really enjoy my art. It's a different side of me. I really enjoy that. I always have a very Nigerian brain, very entrepreneur, very business mind driven. So I really love the creative direction side of things. I think if I could encapsulate into two would be keep doing creative direction projects and art and photography and painting and whatever it might be, like costumes and costume design and things like that. I would love to do a film, a feature film,
Mm,
where I could go completely nuts with my costumes, with my outfit, the creation of that. That's another form of art.
yes.
I think those would be the thing where really I'd love to hit.
Yeah. So where can people find you? Let's give people, where can they see what, your style and your projects? Where would you like people to come and find you?
On my Instagram, you can come, you can see me, and then my website, you can see more of my art. But yeah, Instagram, I would say is the best way to follow me and to see my life and my project because it's all like my intertwined life is all mixing there. Like I'm a hybrid, as you well have understood now.
That's
And
nice.
you can see that. I think soon I'm going to open a page where I will just showcase my painting.
Yeah.
But as it stands now, everything is my Instagram page and my website, those two.
And what's your Instagram handle, just so people know?
Fu Safira, Fu_Safira.
Yeah. And can they see pictures of you and what you're wearing?
Yeah.
Good, because I think everyone wants to see your. And just so when you get up in the morning, do you think, what will I wear today? Or is it just more fluid than that?
It depends. It depends because I am busy, so sometimes like I don't have the time to think an outfit, so it has to be quick. But in these years, I've built an amazing wardrobe, so I do have a uniform college, so if I don't have to think, I know, okay, this is gonna go work with this, I can just wear it and go. But then there are other days where I have more time, and then I like, okay, let's express, and then I will create an outfit. But I really enjoy my evening commitments, because in my evening commitments where I can truly just really be fabulous, and I love being fabulous. I love wearing gorgeous garments, dresses, and I adore it. I really just enjoy it. Like, I don't even do it for anyone. It's like, it's a form of peace and enjoyment for myself.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing all this. We could talk for hours, but it's really lovely to hear about your life.
Thank you for having me and, asking me to join you here.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.